Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Bombshell Diaries. My name is Laura Preshnell, and I'm the founder of Balanced Bombshells. And today joining us is Abby Mercado, who is the co-founder and CEO of Rescripted, which is a media platform rescripting the whole fertility journey for people trying to conceive, going through IVF, or dealing with pregnancy loss. So welcome, Abby. I'm excited to talk with you today and certainly talk about your work, but also be diving into your own personal journey on trying to conceive.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Laura. I'm super excited to talk to you about all of the things.
So before we dive into your own personal journey, can you tell us a little bit about Rescripted?
Yes, I would love to. So Rescripted is the #1 global media platform for fertility, infertility, and pregnancy loss. We reach about 3 million people on a monthly basis. And we are a tech company at our core. So, what does that mean? We call ourselves a bit of a mullet. So we're media in the front, technology in the back. So technology, we have 3 different apps. The first is a social network where we invite folks who don't want to communicate about sensitive topics like fertility and pregnancy loss on traditional social media platforms. So we invite them to our safe, compassionate, loving space to talk with other like-minded folks who might be going through the same thing. So that's our social network. Secondly, we have a product marketplace. So in our product marketplace, we're featuring products from big companies and also products from startups, and really kind of lifting the veil on what you want, what you need, and what you never knew you wanted or needed on your fertility journey. And then lastly, we have a direct-to-consumer digital pharmacy. So it's our thought that if you're paying out of pocket for, for instance, fertility medication, so IVF meds, that you should have a choice as to who you order your medications from. So we love being that choice for so many patients. We think we have just so much more tech enablement than some of the other pharmacies in the space. So that is our digital pharmacy, the only pharmacy in the fertility space that was founded by fertility patients for fertility patients. So that is Rescripted. Yes, I know, it's confusing.
Yeah. Well, it's such a good story too, because I feel like you guys obviously practice what you preach and know the whole journey that people are going through, especially if someone's coming to your site who is trying to conceive and might not know yet that they might be struggling with infertility because they just started, or someone who had dealt with a pregnancy loss, and there just is such a lack of support in today's market. And I think a lot of women are craving it. So was so excited to learn about your product and your brand and your whole platform, your personal story, which is why I was also excited to chat with you today. So why don't we kind of start there, if you want to dive in a little bit about your trying to conceive journey and kind of what happened to be able to have your children.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to share that. So let's see, starting from the beginning. So Sean and I met, we live here in Denver. We're both from Texas. We met in college, but then we re-met in Denver when I moved here just out of the blue for a job at a startup. And he had been here for a few months, and a mutual friend was like, hey, you should meet Sean, remember Sean from college. And I was like, no, I mean, maybe. Sure. But anyway, we'll become friends. So long story short, we became super fast friends. So we were best friends for about 6 months. And then we realized we were in love. And we started dating, we dated, and, then we got married, just a bit of a textbook romance and, the whole thing. And so when we got married, and something you should know about me, I'm super type A. So I'm very, very by the book. I'm an Enneagram 3. So that's me. Really,
that's awesome. Yeah.
Yep. So I was like, okay. And Sean and I agreed on this. We were like, okay, we're going to get married. 2 years later, we're going to have a kid. And, 2 more years after that, we're going to have another kid, and that'll be our family. We both come from families of 4, and, just that's the life that we wanted. And, we were excited to build that life together. And so I remember 2 years after we got married, we went on a trip to Spain, and we just made the biggest deal out of pulling the goalie. And we were like, okay, I'm going on birth control. We're not going to use protection, the whole thing. We were in this Spanish village, and like I even bought a dream catcher to like commemorate the fact that like we were probably gonna get pregnant. Like silly Abby. So
Well, not
anyway,
silly. We're
and
taught like it's going to
yes,
happen so quickly, and
yes, yeah,
it
you're right.
can, but it also can't.
Yeah, but also like for most people it doesn't, and like
Yeah.
that
It's
should be
correct.
normal. And you
Right.
know, it's like how many people actually conceive in the first 3 months? Like
It's
I don't know the
it's pretty
statistic,
small.
but it's a really small
Yeah.
percentage of us. So anyway, fast forward like 3 months, type A Abby, I'm like, we still didn't see those, you know, 2 pink lines. Type A Abby, I was like, okay, something's wrong. So I go get tested. I go to my gyno. She's like, honestly, like your chick's fertile, like all your levels are great. I was 31 at the time when we like first started trying to conceive. And they were like, okay, not like you should, you know, Sean should get tested as well. And, you know, to me, it was weird. I was like, wait, what? Like, that's a thing? Like, isn't it just the woman? Like, we didn't even know.
Yeah.
And this was 2017.
I think the stat is it's 60% the woman, 40% the man.
Yeah. Yeah. And which is increased.
Yeah.
It's like, anyway, and it's most often like both people, actually.
Well, because I've worked with a lot of women where they'll be like, killing themselves to balance their hormones and their husband isn't doing anything. And I was like, oh, we should probably talk about him also changing some of his habits because it's not just you. It's not just the woman.
Yeah, I talked to a woman this morning who's a partner of ours, and her husband had avaspermia, and they went through 3 IVF cycles without even knowing that.
Oh my gosh.
Like, what?
Right.
Like, how is that even possible? Like, it's crazy. So
was he not tested before they started doing IVF?
I don't think so. I was like, what clinic is that?
I feel like that would be a prerequisite to be
right. I'm like, you should sue them. Like, what the hell?
So get your money back. Yeah.
Yes. And so, so basically Sean's results came back like not good. But like we, you know, it wasn't like, I mean, TLDR, like your OB-GYN shouldn't be interpreting like sperm testing results, and like that's what happened to us. And so they were like, yeah, it's like not that bad, but you should go to a fertility clinic just in case. So we go to a fertility clinic in January. At this point it's 2018, and I'm also like, friends left and right getting pregnant, like all the things, feel so left out. I'm like, what's wrong with us? Like, we're never gonna have kids, like all the things,
right?
And I think like importantly, as a couple, we were like, all we want to do is have a family. Like we talked about adoption, like before we got married, we were like, we will adopt, like we will have a family no matter what. Like this is something we'll do. So that was, you know, an important discussion that we were always like in agreement on. So I went to a fertility clinic and they retested Sean, and they were basically like, this is bad.
Interesting.
Like, this is bad. Like, no, like you guys, you can do IUI, but like it will be a waste of time and money. Like you have to do IVF. So he had very low motility, very poor morphology. So motility, like basically his sperm, he's a really social guy. So we like joke about the fact that like his sperm was like swimming in a circle, like not going towards the egg.
Too excited to talk with the other
buddies. Like there, he's like, hey, like the sperm, we're like, hey, what's up? Where are you going? Where are you going? And anyway, that's like not what sperm should be, like single track mind, like let's find the egg, not Sean's sperm. And then poor morphology, meaning like the shape of his sperm, like that wasn't great. So, so we were like, all right, let's just try IUI, just like see what'll happen. So at that point, neither of our employers offered coverage for fertility treatments. And, we were like,
was that conversation awkward? Like, did you have to go in and ask like HR, or did you already know?
No, I didn't even, like neither, like we didn't even think that was an option. We were like, oh, well, like we'll figure out how to pay for this. Yeah. So we started with IUI because it was $2,000, and we were like, okay, we can scratch off money. So it didn't work. That sucked. And so that was the month of April. So it like took all that time to like get all of our testing and like have all of our meetings and stuff. And like IVF doesn't happen immediately. And so the month of May, we had the discussion with our doctor that like it was time to do IVF, or like it was time to do IVF. So we did 1 month where it was kind of like a test a test month. So it was my priming cycle, if you will. So I was on all the meds, and like we were just like priming my body to like go through retrieval the month of June. We were going to do a fresh transfer like into July. And we were just like gonna go because like we were pretty young. I was 32 then. Sean was also 32. And we were like, that makes sense.
When they do like the priming cycle, is it something where like your body's obviously on like hormones, but it's not where you do like the trigger shot to release like multiple eggs for the retrieval?
So we didn't get there, and I'll tell you why. So we became pregnant naturally, which was absolutely wild. So we were, but so we were told we had less than a 1% chance of conceiving naturally. So when we got pregnant, we were like, what the heck? Like, how is this even possible? And we ended up, so I was on a drug called Cetrotide, which is the antagonist. So like, it's basically like keeping your body from actually ovulating. And so like I took this medication, like, you know, and being in Colorado, we were on a camping trip. It was Memorial Day weekend. So I accidentally took, I think, 3 extra doses of this medication, and I was pregnant, unbeknownst to me. So long story short, I was, you know, became pregnant, found out we were pregnant. We were so happy. Like, we were so thrilled. We like told everybody. I'd go to the fertility clinic, and they started testing my beta, and my beta dropped, and they were like, "You're going to miscarry." So unfortunately, I ended up miscarrying that pregnancy. It was absolutely devastating, the hardest thing ever. You know, ultimately, like that moment itself inspired me to be a fertility entrepreneur and to, you know, help people with, you know, just across the spectrum, infertility, fertility, and pregnancy loss, but like specifically help people with medications if they have, and that's, you know, a small part of what we do, but like help people with medications who are going through IVF. So yeah, the miscarriage happened. It was absolutely devastating. The miscarriage was pretty early. It was, I think I miscarried at 6 weeks. So I was able to basically restart IVF. So
that's good. They didn't make you wait.
They didn't make us wait too long.
Because our first pregnancy ended in a loss, and it was like just shy of 10 weeks. And it was like too far along where they basically were like, you need an entire cycle to like reset before you start trying. Because if you got pregnant and there was like, it was like increased risk in the uterus is what they mentioned. So if we got pregnant and my body was still trying to like reset, and there then became an infection while you're pregnant, they'd have to abort the pregnancy. So we were like, wow, we'll wait a month before starting. So it's nice that you're able to start right away.
Yeah. So, you know, luckily for that, it's like from a mental health perspective, like I was not in a good place. It was horrific.
There's something, I mean, can we touch on that a little bit? Like the mental health aspect? Because I feel like, you know, women will share that they've gone through pregnancy loss, and anyone who's gone through, like, no one is ever expecting it. Like, we all know it can happen. And statistically, 1 in 4 pregnancies will end in miscarriage. So like just statistically, if we're going to try and have kids, and we're going to try and have multiple kids, the likelihood of experiencing at least 1 miscarriage along our journey is very high, which no one ever talks about. But then when you experience it, like for me, I like objectively understood, which I felt like helped me. But then like the mental health component of your mind just goes through a very dark place of like, am I going to be able to do this? Are we ever going to have kids? Just so much grief around the loss that I found it really hard to actually talk about. Like, I personally shut down because I felt like I needed a way to like process so low. How did you deal with like walking through those early days after the miscarriage?
I mean, like, if you told me about it, it's like I barely dealt with it. Like, I didn't have, you know, I'd never seen a therapist. Like, I was, you know, in a pretty, like I was working in venture capital and like extremely male dominated. Like, I didn't have a very supportive place of work. Like, there was no bereavement leave, nothing like that. And I was also, you know, I said, like, I saw all of my friends around me getting pregnant, but like, I was also, as I look back now, I'm especially in that kind of the earlier wave of my friends, like in terms of getting pregnant and like starting families. And so no one no one I knew had like really been through a
Same.
miscarriage, but like my friends rose to the occasion. Like
Mhm.
my two friends, Lauren and Chelsea in particular, like they came straight over to my house and they just hugged me and like let me cry. And like another thing people don't talk about, like a miscarriage, like it's not immediate. Like it takes time, and unfortunately, it feels like, I mean, for like an earlier stage miscarriage, which like, you know, by the way, people are like, oh, well, it's basically a chemical pregnancy. Like it makes it less hard. Like it is always hard no matter what.
Regardless
Like
of how
there
it
was
happens.
a life in your body and it is no longer there.
You had
And
a
that
due
life was
date.
your DNA. Totally. Like you started designing the nursery in your head, like, you know, all the things. Yeah. And um, so like for, you know, like I was able to like pass the pregnancy, like mostly, like my body was able to pass the pregnancy mostly by itself, mostly, and I'll get there. But it feels like the most painful period you've ever had in your entire life. And like nobody talks about that. Like you're in bed,
They
you're
told me I would
bleeding.
experience some cramping. We ended up doing the medication route, which would basically like one medication would tell the body that's no longer pregnant, and then the next day you had to do like vaginal suppositories to basically trigger the loss of the pregnancy. It was basically what it felt like for me, and it was probably prompted more from being later stages pregnancy and taking the medication. It felt like a mini labor.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not light cramping or some cramping. Like that was 4 hours.
It was incredibly painful.
Yes.
Incredibly painful. I mean, it's such a problem, just like with women's health in general. Like
they sugarcoat,
and you're just like
give it total, to me real.
Total side note, I got an IUD like 2 weeks ago, and like the doctor was like, you know, it's going to be uncomfortable. The biggest pain I've ever had in my whole entire life.
I have heard that. I've never done the IUD because I was always really scared of it. And you can give me an update in a few weeks of how it's going. But I've heard, well, and it's somewhat like it's all also independent. Like some women might feel that, others don't feel anything. When women have gotten it out, it's been painful. Other women, they don't feel anything. So it's like,
well, they didn't even, and they didn't even, like, I had a C-section, but like, they didn't, apparently it's less painful if you've had a vaginal birth. And
interesting.
Like, they didn't even dive into that with me. I was like, wait, what? You mean, like, you didn't even tell me to take Advil. Like,
right. That would have been helpful.
Like, also, you didn't ask me about my pregnancy experience. Anyway.
Well, I also felt like the bedside manner of a lot of the doctors, I had to go in through a lot of visits after the miscarriages. I'm assuming you might have too, where they had to like make sure the tissue passed and like make sure everything was clear. I saw 4 OBs from the start of like the miscarriage to when we were like cleared. Only one of them asked me how I was like emotionally doing.
Really?
One of them. And she said, my first pregnancy ended in a loss. And she's like, I now have 2 boys. And she's like, I know how you're feeling. And she's like, it just completely stinks. It was your first one. Like just more there for me versus the other women who were just like, okay, here's what you do. It's just another day. And I'm just like, thankfully I'm like a strong woman and I'm going to emotionally deal. But I could not believe that not only one of them out of 4 asked me how I was emotionally doing.
That is really hard and like really upsetting. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. And it's like, I mean, we just need better holistic health. You know, like every, like a woman's care practitioner, like they should all be talking.
Right.
So, anyway.
Yeah. And they're not, but you know, aside from the point.
So I ended up not being able to pass the whole pregnancy. So I did end up having to take medication. And I do remember the doctor's appointments, and I was like, I just want to move on.
Right.
Like I have grieved. You know, I just want to move on. And, you know, luckily we were able to restart, but there's just this, like, especially for your first pregnancy, and I shouldn't say especially, like it's always awful. But like for me, there was so much fear in like my subsequent pregnancy. Like, the first trimester was mental gymnastics.
Yes.
You know, like for the first like 13 weeks, I was like, is this going to be like, it just makes pregnancy so hard if you've had a miscarriage before.
I begged
you
for
know?
an extra ultrasound. So
Yeah.
I went in when you're supposed to go at 8 weeks, and I said, we miscarried around 10. I was like, can I come back in at 10 weeks
Yeah.
instead of waiting till 12? And I was
Yeah.
like, whatever you need to do to pass us through this, our insurance, and just say we've got a really anxious mom, like that would, I was like, I need it. And then
Yeah.
we went again at like 13 weeks. So I kind of spaced out a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you did with your ultrasounds, but I also would hold my breath until I heard the heartbeat. Like
Oh, yeah.
it felt like I could not breathe or relax until I heard that heartbeat. And sometimes they would
Yeah.
turn on the monitor and not the sound. And I was like, is it okay? Like, can you just give me this verbal confirmation? Because I don't know how to read your ultrasounds yet.
Yeah. And you hear about like, it's like ultrasonographers are like not exactly allowed to give you bad news. And
Right.
like if the ultrasonographer like wasn't like saying anything, like I was always trying to like maintain conversation with like mostly with her. And like, one moment of silence, I was like, something wrong, is something wrong? Why isn't she talking? Like,
Right.
who is she going to get somebody? Like, what is happening here?
Yeah. But even in the ultrasounds after the first trimester, I found myself still doing the same thing where I would hold my breath. And I was just like, I know I can feel your movements. Like, I know you're okay, but like, I really do need this confirmation to be able to know for sure. And I feel like I personally wasn't expecting the mountain of fear that came with being pregnant again and like walking through it.
Oh yeah. So absolutely insane. Also, I guess so. We did our IVF retrieval. Like we, got some eggs, and and then we went on vacation, which was really nice.
Yeah.
We decided to do a frozen transfer, which was really interesting because we, like being so young, like we didn't really think super hard about doing PGT testing. So like most, for the listeners and viewers, like most miscarriages take place because of genetic abnormalities. So doing PGT testing makes it, like they can detect genetic abnormalities.
Correct. And it's smart.
It's very expensive, $6,000, but it was like something like, especially given the miscarriage, like something that like we wanted to make sure I wasn't going to miscarry again. At least for a reason of like there being a genetic abnormality in the embryo. So we did that, and we actually got only 50% were genetically normal, which was a little bit odd for our age. So I'm glad we did it. And then we decided to transfer 2 embryos. And by the way, we mortgaged our home to do IVF. So that was kind of crazy.
I was reading that on your website where I was like, also the other side of this is the financial demand that it takes on couples.
Yep. So that was really hard. But then, we ultimately made the decision to transfer 2 embryos. I had like super complex thoughts about transferring 2 embryos. It is like some doctors just straight up won't do it.
Because they don't want you to have twins, or
they don't want you to have twins because they're just such high risk pregnancies.
Okay.
And so we were like, we know we're gonna have to do IVF. Like we're, again, like we just want to do this once. We want to do one and done.
Right.
And so we transferred 2. They both suck. They are 3. They are named Max and Annie. I had an extremely high risk pregnancy. And they ended up, like I was super sick my first trimester. About 20 weeks, Annie's foot was just like forever in my ribs. That was hard. And then I had a sudden onset preeclampsia that was not detected in my urine. So the way that preeclampsia is typically detected is by like a urine sample and seeing protein in urine. And they didn't catch it. And so
was it because like the level, was it just like, because usually it's like a strip that they use, right?
It was,
I don't know how viable they are.
Yeah, like something happened where they like didn't see a lot of I was showing like telltale signs of preeclampsia, like in my body, like externally. Like take one look at my ankles and you could see my like blood pressure like being super high. Like they did not look healthy. And so they finally detected it, and I I finally like went in and ended up having an emergency C-section, had to see a maternal fetal medicine doctor, like kind of right at the end, went on magnesium. And I gave birth at 34 weeks and 4 days.
Which is another scary
super scary thing. Yes.
And
so
they're
Max
twins,
and Annie,
and
they're
means
twins.
they'd be smaller.
Yep. And so they were, Annie was 4 pounds, 11 ounces, Max was 4 pounds, 10 ounces. They were in the NICU for about a month, a little bit less than a month. They were champs, like they were healthy. Growers and feeders is what they call them. So they just needed to learn, to eat better. So, and like, thank goodness for that. They say with twins, once you pass the 32-week mark, like you can, breathe a little bit, but like, that's still just like not okay. Yeah. Like twins they're high risk pregnancies. And, the scariest part for all of us was my postpartum hemorrhage. So I had a really scary postpartum hemorrhage. So was
that like after you left the hospital or after you gave birth?
No, I was still in the hospital. Thankfully, a postpartum hemorrhage, like my co-founder, Kristen, also has twins, had a postpartum hemorrhage in her home. Which was that is so scary. Like she had to, ambulance, like lost consciousness, like all the things. And like a new mom, right? Like,
you're already like, I have no idea what's going on.
I have no idea what's going on. And like, I'm not taking care of myself right now. Like I'm taking care of others. But so mine was in the hospital and I lost a third of the blood in my body and I almost had to have the hysterectomy. So it was horrible. So if you opt for twins, make sure you understand the risks.
Yes.
So
that's
my whole story. But they're really cute and they're really fun and they're best friends.
Oh, that's
and some people have twin pregnancies that are like totally normal and totally fine. So.
One of my girlfriends is a identical twin and they were heavy twins. They were both like 7 pounds.
Oh my God.
And their mom was
like a lot of baby.
I mean, she's had heavier children and she's like, I knew it. She's like, I was a big twin. But her mom, she'll tell you, she's like, they did a number on me.
Oh my God, I bet.
A lot of babies, like.
Yeah. I was 9 pounds, 11 ounces. And my mom still talks about it.
Yeah.
I'm like, cool. Thanks, Mom.
When we were trying, I asked my husband and I was like, how big were you as a kid? Like, I just want to understand what genetics are also going to become in my body. And he's like, I don't know. So I called his mom and I was like, how much did Tyler weigh? So I was 7 pounds. He was like 13 or something.
All right. Yeah. He's a big guy.
Yeah.
Big baby.
But our son was 6 pounds 9 ounces and he was 2 weeks early. So I was like, okay. I was like,
you can hang with that.
Yeah. I actually didn't mind 2 weeks early because I was like, this is also easier to pass through. Like you're a smaller baby. So
yeah.
I mean, it's just all of it is a lot, whether you're doing C-section, vaginal. So, I mean, not only that, but then it's also like recovering from the C-section and then bringing home not 1 baby, but 2 babies.
Yeah, that was, so the one silver lining about the NICU is that, I mean, it's like whenever you bring a baby home from the hospital, like you don't know what you're doing, right?
No,
nobody
I
knows.
never changed the diaper until we
me neither. But like for the NICU, like they taught us like really everything we needed to know about like caring for a baby.
Yeah.
Like I learned how to like feed them. I learned how to, bathe them, put on their diapers. Like I can wrap a swaddle like you wouldn't believe. But it's
the
only
tightness
because
matters.
yes, but it's only because of Yvonne, our NICU nurse, who like we still talk to. Like she's amazing. Like she's just a part of our lives. But it was, and like, importantly, because I had had such a dramatic delivery and like such a dramatic kind of like immediate postpartum experience, that time was fraught with guilt because like I wasn't there with them. Like I was away from my baby. So like that was incredibly hard.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I was able to like take care of myself and like be okay for when they came home. And when they came home, like, it's like people are like, oh, twins hard. Like, yeah, but like babies are hard.
Right.
And also I have nothing to compare it to.
Right. Yeah. You know nothing else.
Yeah. I'm like, I've taken care of 2 babies. Like women have done incredible things in the history of the world. Like,
well, did you end up putting them on the same schedule anyway?
Oh yeah.
I feel like it's needed.
With twins, you do. It's like like twin rule number one.
Yeah.
Like
Don't
if they're on
schedule.
if they're on different schedules, like that is a really bad thing. But
Yeah.
like another thing that I was like, I mean, what mom does not feel guilty about breastfeeding? I wasn't able to because I kind of had like three things going against me. So the first one, like breast milk is made out of blood, like as we have heard. I didn't have any blood.
Right. Yeah. He lost
like,
a lot of blood.
Have any. They came super early.
Yeah.
Obviously, as we've heard. And so like my body wasn't expecting them to come yet. And then third, there were two of them.
Right.
And like,
I've heard a lot of twin moms are like, I can't even keep up with the demand if they are able to breastfeed.
Yeah. So it's like, it's hard for your body to rise to the occasion. And like my body just could not rise to the occasion. But, you know, I will say like, I don't know how twin moms who are able to breastfeed did it. Like, because I don't know it. I don't know.
Well,
like,
so one thing I learned was our son didn't latch for nursing for the first 8 weeks. He was born with like a slightly inverted chin or jaw, which made like latching harder. So he latched when it grew out, basically. But I like didn't know that. We went to lactation consultants. No one mentioned it. It was like I happened to Google it one night because our pediatrician mentioned it in passing.
Of course, so Google it one night, like 2 a.m. when you're like, what is happening? Like, why can't we all just get along? Like, Son and Laura.
So it was a lot. So I exclusively pumped during that time, and I remember, you know, you're so engorged. There's a lot going on, so you want to pump to feel better. But basically, the way you would feed one baby is like, especially when they're newborns, you just feed on one side and the next feeding you feed on another. So when you're pumping, most of the time you're going to use both sides. And that's actually how twins are fed. So I also was overproducing milk because of the breast pump. So my body was actually producing milk for 2 babies, not 1, because of the double pump.
Oh my goodness.
So as they get older, like he would then feed on one side, feed on the other, because he was like consuming more. And then my body also regulated a lot better for what his demand was versus an electric pump of what I thought I was supposed to do. And I didn't know. Wow. So I'm wondering if like the body is like very smart. So I think women might be able to just fully feed off of one side. And who knows if they end up having to supplement at a certain point as they get older. But some women also overproduce breast milk. I probably could have if I kept pumping and didn't understand, like didn't learn. But I was like, oh, I'm literally telling my body that 2 kids are feeding instead of 1. So for the next one, I'll be a little bit more aware and understanding of how to slow it down.
And it's also like, what was so interesting, you know, as a mom who like I really tried so hard to breastfeed and like I just couldn't and I had to let go. And it was like a huge like mental, emotional health thing for me too. Like it's really hard to let go. But you know, my husband, my mom, like we're all like, this is not good for anybody. Right. Like we need you healthy to take care of
it's
kids.
A lot on the women's mental health.
Like, And so, but like when we had our, you know, formula shortage, what was it, like a few weeks ago, like seeing all this stuff on social media about like truly how hard breastfeeding is. And like how time consuming it is and how expensive it can be and how confusing it is and how like it is the most natural thing. Yes, it's the most natural thing, but it also like cannot be the most natural thing for so many people. And it's so hard. Like we don't talk about, I think we're starting to talk about it more, but like, you know, historically we haven't really talked about it very much.
I found it easier when I would feed him, but if I had to pump, that was where my mental breakdowns would happen. I had a really hard time with the pumps. And also what happens that nobody tells you is your nipple size can change. So the shields that you're using might not be fully effective throughout your nursing journey, which is like why the pumps might not be as effective. But it's like, no one's giving us a rundown on like all of these things that could like change.
Could happen. Yeah.
So I felt very uneducated on all of it. And then our son went on so when my period came back when he was 6 months old and we had introduced solids at 5 months. So some women don't get their period back until they're done nursing. Some might get it back like me when you drop the feeds and your cycle can come back when you're not feeding as much.
Yeah.
But he went on a nursing strike at 8 months. And I was like doing all this research because none of my friends, of course, had gone through it.
Yeah.
And I was like, why is this happening? So apparently when you have your cycle, when you ovulate and when you have your period and you're nursing, you have a drop in supply during those 2 parts of your cycle. And it can also, for a few days, change the taste of the breast milk from sweet to salty. So as
What?
it was
As a
craving,
baby, you're like, I totally, dude, I get it.
of course, like this is completely different. Like what's going on? I had no idea. And then the literature I read on it was like, you should overcome it within like a few days, or like most babies don't notice a change. And I was like, well, my baby's
My
noticing and
baby
he's
did.
pissed about it. Yeah. So we
No
never
kidding.
recovered. I tried
How
for like 3 weeks.
fascinating is
Yeah.
that? And like, I mean, knowing you were like charting all the data and you're like,
Yeah.
what is going
Reading
on? Like, what is
everything.
happening? Reading everything, like taking notes, like doing
Yeah.
math, like
Yeah.
all the things.
And I was
Oh
like,
my
well,
gosh.
and I was also over stressing myself out. Like when my supply would drop, I would notice and I would go to pump to try and like build it up.
Yeah.
And then I was over stressing myself out by having to like pump more, which I already didn't want to do. And then nothing would actually change with the supply anyway, because I was either ovulating or having my period. And it was just like a natural progression of our body. I'm wondering if it's a natural weaning process that the body takes for the baby, knowing that they're introducing solids and like, who knows? But all the things you don't know, you go through it and you're just like, no one's sharing this and talking about it. So
it's insane. Like
yeah.
the education needs to change. But like there's so many startups in this space that I'm so excited about that are like actually like everybody needs to have a lactation consultant.
Yes.
That they can just like call on.
Right. I mean, like, just give me the rundown of what's going on.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even when we met with professionals, I still didn't necessarily feel like I was getting the full support. Like even from lactation consultants we met with, I was like, because even like mother's intuition, I think is very strong. And I remember the first night at the hospital, I was like, it doesn't look like his mouth can open wide enough. Like I remember thinking that initially when we went to try, and lo and behold, yeah. So everything ended up like my intuition was always right. So I think for women too, was like really honoring how we're feeling about our baby and what's coming forward. And like everyone's going to have their own opinion about what's happening and what you should do. But how do you feel? And I really tried to sit with that of like, I know best. And it is what it is. So we're going to release a lot of the pressure from society because
the mom's always right and always knows.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your story with us about how your beautiful babies came into play. So you mentioned being like one and done in terms of pregnancy. So does that mean your family is complete?
I don't know. It's like, that's one of those things I do not know. I feel like I maybe should know, but I don't know. Maybe not. Like we've got 2 frozen embryos. I have an IUD, we've talked about. So it's like definitely not like anytime soon, but I don't know, I could see it, but I could also like not see it. I think that like travel is it's a big priority for our family. So I think there was a moment a couple of weeks ago when, like this is best summer ever, right? Like things are open and like we're actually having like the summer that we deserve, and it's amazing. And like I started thinking, I had the internal question, oh, like when do you think we could go on a safari? And I was like, gosh, like
when they're 5?
Really, that would be really difficult with 3 kids. I don't know, maybe like obviously people do it, but like I don't know if we could pull it off. But then,
well, if you go when they're young enough, they can just be in a baby carrier.
But then it's so expensive. And like you want them to see it and like you want them to remember it. So it's like, when can I like sustainably like bring my kids to a place like Africa and have them remember that for the rest of their lives? So I don't know, that's like the count against it. But the count for it is like, gosh, these beautiful humans are just like a part of you. And like how could I not want more? I don't know, Laura. It's so hard. It's so hard. I have no idea.
Like I feel like you'll get to a point where you're like, especially if it's like time to make a choice. And like tuning into your gut reaction, I feel like is the best way to like make the decision too. And at least like on your side, your kids are 3. Let's say you got pregnant like in a month. they'd be like 4, you'd have like 2 helpers. So it's also like you
Really? Promise?
I feel like
they don't seem very hopeful right now. But
well,
maybe you have to know them.
Yeah. Or maybe like, I mean, I bet if they had like another little baby around, they would be open to helping. It's like part of their play too, right? So
yeah.
hopefully.
Who even, but then I'd have to get my ID out.
Yeah.
Like that would be painful. I don't know. We'll see. I think you're right. I think I'll know when I'll know when I know, you know?
Right. And it's good that you have the option too.
Totally. And like, that's the amazing thing about our, you know, like this technology that we have and like the science that we've untapped. Like we can make that choice when I'm 36 right now. And, you know, if we were trying to conceive when I was 40, like it's science, like my egg quality wouldn't be as good at all. Like you just straight up should not assume that you can have a child at 40, like straight up. But with IVF, like, yeah, easy.
Right.
So,
and it's just, I mean, it can happen. My grandmother had her 4th child at 40 and she had an oops baby at 41. Just back to back. Like my mom was 15 when the youngest was born. And she's like, it's not cool to be in high school and your mom's still having kids. I mean, some women's fertility is like unreal, but for the rest of us, having the science behind us is extremely helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
But I encourage anyone who is looking to conceive, struggling through pregnancy loss, or wanting to learn more information about IVF, visiting Rescripted. I'm going to leave the link in the description box so you guys can visit the website. There's so many helpful blog articles. There's a marketplace. There's a medicine section. I mean, just a support section. You have really thought of every angle that women need on this journey, and it's so needed right now. And I feel like the more we can tell other women about it, especially if they're not open to talking about it in their own personal lives or with other people on social media, like just having, I think that privacy is really important too. I was one of those people who weren't open to talking about it until I was ready. So especially walking through it, you're just like, I don't know, kind of like a lone wolf, just like even just trying to process and like understand like what's happening. And there's just like a lot across all these journeys that we're on. So I thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you for inviting me on, Laura. This has been a blast.